please press yes to take roll call. We have 10 members present.
And we have two proclamations tonight. First one is very special, for the Yankee Bookstore celebrates 100 years in operation, whereas in 1919, Carly Yankee and Reno Kurth affirmed the entrepreneurial spirit and established Yankee Kurth Booksellers in downtown Wausau. And Yankee Kurth Booksellers became Yankee Bookstore in 1948 and continued as a community bookstore, at which time second generation John Yankee joined the business. And Jim and Jane Yankee joined John and Dolores Yankee into the business that became the third generation small business owners. And the Yankee family has promoted the knowledge of Wausau history through authorship and the publication of Wausau books. And Yankee Bookstore has become the cultural and literary hub of central Wisconsin. And the Yankee family helped contribute a large economic investment in downtown Wausau. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Robert B. Mielke, Mayor of the great city of Wausau, do hereby acknowledge and congratulate the Yankee Bookstore in celebration of their 100th anniversary in the city of Wausau, and commends the Yankee family for their community support and their longtime investment into the downtown Wausau area. And we do have representatives here. People, a few words.
Just a few words. We love Wausau. Thank you for your support.
And then the second proclamation is for the Early Childhood Development Awareness Day. Whereas the first few years of a child's life provide the opportunity to create a solid foundation for future development and have the potential to establish a robust starting point for lifelong cognitive, social, academic, and emotional abilities. And the most effective systems for early child care and education are ones that expose children to quality learning environments with trained professionals who understand brain development, create opportunities for learning, and work with parents to support and to encourage development and growth. And since 2011, Marathon County has seen a decrease of 55% in regulated child care programs, resulting in coinciding decrease of more than 1,000 individual child care slots in regulated child care settings across the county. And the feature-length documentary film No Small Matter was released in the spring of 2019 and uses the latest scientific research combined with modern child care stories to demonstrate both the importance of quality early child care and the impact the lack of affordable and high-quality options has on families as well as communities. On October 23rd, tomorrow, the No Small Matter feature documentary will be shown at 5:30 p.m. at the Westwood Conference Center in Wausau as a part of a joint effort between the Marathon County Early Years Coalition, Marathon County Special Education, the United Way of Marathon County, and Wisconsin Public Radio. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Robert B. Mielke, Mayor of the great city of Wausau, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, October 23rd, 2019, as Early Childhood Development Awareness Day in the city of Wausau and encourage healthy family engagement during the crucial early years of development in order to enrich our community and grow our economy both now and into the future. And now it is time for the selection of the District 8 applicants. We will be doing this by alphabetical order. And before I turn it over to the city clerk, I ask you folks, I know 3 minutes is kind of a short time. I've extended it to 3 to 5 minutes, please, to state your case, so to speak. If council members have any questions for these individuals, they are allowed to go ahead and do so. Tony Rayella, it's all up to you.
All right, so we do have a process here, and I did send out some information to the council members and to the candidates of them coming forth and speaking to everybody. What we're going to get started with, just so that everyone knows how this is going to go, I'm going to help everybody through so you don't have to remember everything right now, but we'll start with the paper ballot because we have 4 candidates. If someone gets 6 or more votes, they are seated. That's a majority vote. They're going to take their position they won. If it proceeds ahead where there's top 3 candidates, then we'll use the voting system, et cetera, down to 2, thus down to 1. And again, I'll help everybody through with any of these questions. Just like the mayor said, we do want to ask them to come forth. And we did extend the time from 3 minutes to 5. And we will allow or encourage the council to ask any questions also of each candidate. So we're going to start with, if I can, Linda Lawrence, would you, or excuse me, Thomas Tony Brown. And just so everyone knows, he is Thomas Brown, but your preference is Tony.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank the council for granting me a variance this spring to remodel my duplex. If you get in the neighborhood, I'm at 715 North Fifth. I think you'll like the difference. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about is my family. Ironically enough, one of the agenda items you have tonight is dealing with the Blanker construction crew, and my brother Timothy Brown, who did the Franklin Heights development, was instrumental in bringing them to town to begin their jobs in this area. And my brother Michael worked as a construction person with them, and my mom, Elaine Brown, was a secretary of Wausau West, the second person hired there. Now, I haven't been in the community as long as they have, but I've always obviously traveled back home for my travels. I lived overseas, participated as an observer in city development of the highest order, and that was in the United Arab Emirates. There was no council, there was just a sheikh, and they did what they wanted to do. But they did a pretty darn good job on the infrastructure in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and in Al Ain, where the city, which is the city I lived in. Wausau, I think, has a lot of unique opportunities and challenges ahead of themselves, and will, I hope, do as good a job as I've seen happen as I've come back here to this community. One of the reasons I'm running is I'd like to be a part of that process that continues the strength and development of Wausau and Marathon County as a good, safe place to live and a place where people that work hard are rewarded for their efforts. I appreciate the opportunities that the city gave me in supporting good schools, which allowed me to continue my education and allowed me to have the adventures I've had through my life. I will work very hard to make this city an even better place than it already is. Any questions?
Mrs. Rasmussen.
Thank you. I have a similar question that I want to ask all the applicants tonight. Mr. Brown, our decision tonight is about the residents of District 8. How will you ensure that issues are addressed, and how will your leadership here impact them?
I ran as a representative for District 8 in the last election, so I did have a chance to go out and visit 50 households in the area. So I think I'm familiar with the people of that area. I certainly will make myself available through letting people know where they can get a hold of me, and I will respond as well as you have. I've called several of you, and you've either answered or responded very quickly afterwards. I would do the same thing.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mrs. Towle.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I have 3 total questions for all the candidates. And first of all, Tony, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your background with us tonight. My first question for you is, how will you improve race relations on the city council? And if appointed to District 8, how will you do the same within the District 8 community?
One of the advantages that I've had is that I've recognized the racial situation in this city as an outsider and insider. When I left this city at the age of 18, it was probably 99.9% white. That is no longer the case. I remember back when the Hmongs first came to this community, it was a very disruptive force for some people, and I think there's still a little residual on that. But it's much, much better. I worked with the Hmong when I worked at the post office for a short period of time. My son did a documentary on the Hmong community in Stevens Point. So I've worked with Native Americans myself, I've worked with the Hispanic community, and I worked with Arabs overseas. And curiously enough, I've had people accuse me of being prejudiced. I would bet there's nobody in this room that has had more experiences with minority groups than I have.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your response. My second question is, what is your position on closed session meetings?
I do not favor closed session meetings. I can remember very vividly going to a school board meeting in Palm Springs where I taught, and it was like Saturday Night Live. The president of the board and members of the board began talking about issues that were discussed in closed session. They said, whoa, wait a minute. We have to go back to closed session. They couldn't remember what they had talked about. No, I prefer public discussion of public issues.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is, how will you represent yourself when faced with tough decisions, when your decision may not be the majority?
I have no problem being in the minority if I know I am correct. I think decision-making is what democracy is all about. If you're familiar with the United States Constitution, it was written in 100 days by 55 people not dissimilar to these people in this room, which means it must have been a lot of discussion and argument going on because that Constitution is only about 10 pages long. So there was a lot of time spent at the tavern discussing those issues, I'm sure. So I don't have a problem. If I feel I'm correct, I will express my view accordingly.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Peckham?
Thank you. I just have one question, and also I plan to ask everybody. If you looked at the meeting packet for tonight, it was 142 pages. And I'm wondering if you, when you gazed upon that pile of reading, what went through your mind?
I thought it was a really nice opportunity to catch up on some issues I wasn't familiar with. I did read all 144 pages. And as I said, I think it's a very interesting process that occurs here on a every other Tuesday basis, basically. No problem with reading documents. I'm going to find out which committee generates most of that paper, though, and go to that meeting.
Okay, no other questions from the council? Thank you, Tony. You can have a seat. We'll call up the next candidate, Joshua Dirks, please.
Good evening. I prepared my notes for 3 minutes, so
And I'm sorry, if you do need to elaborate, you've got plenty of time there.
that's okay. Thank you for this opportunity. I've considered running for some time, but I'm here today mainly because many people that I deeply respect urged me to apply for this position. I view it as my duty as a citizen to make Wausau the best possible city that it can be. I don't take this post lightly and have considered it from every possible angle, including ethical implications of determining the future of individuals that I know personally. I understand the natural bias of working in a tight-knit community, and I'll strive always to be aware of my personal feelings and place them aside for the betterment of the community as a whole. Obviously, it'll take me some time to get up to speed, but I have no doubt in my abilities. The businesses that I'm involved with, the businesses that I'm involved with allow me a very flexible schedules, so I have no problem making myself available to work on the council in chambers and allotting time to research issues outside. I've worked in many fields over the years, including working closely with the downtown businesses and art community. I think the work that you continue to do as a council, especially in those regards, is essential to keeping Wausau vibrant and attracting young professionals and new businesses to this area. I believe my knowledge of construction and business development lend well to broadening the discussion and decision-making abilities of the council. I know intimately how policy and management can affect businesses large and small, and therefore I've found in any endeavor the most essential asset is the ability to ask the right questions. It's well known that planning and approach are the greater part of any job. I've lived in Wausau for the better part of my life, and I know many of the people and issues that they face living here. The reason I chose to stay in Wausau is because I grew up here and thought this was the best possible place I could imagine raising my child. Wausau has come a long way since I was young, but the natural beauty, the positive energy, and the warmth of people has remained a constant. I appreciate the council's continual outreach for public input and would use my skills in that regard to work closely with the community whenever possible, because I believe we are much stronger when we work together. If I'm given this opportunity, I'll do my best to make Wausau the best possible city that it can be for the constituents of my district and the community as a whole. Thank you.
Questions? Mrs. Rasmussen?
Thank you. I have two questions for this applicant. I have the same one that I asked Mr. Brown, but I also have another question. And in your application materials, Mr. Dirks, I noticed that in your employment history, you show that you have been since 2008 and are still currently a server at Intermission.
Yes.
This position comes with an appointment to the Public Health and Safety Committee. The Public Health and Safety Committee regulates tavern and server licensing. Do you believe that that presents a conflict of interest for you, and how would you manage that conflict?
Yeah, I've spoken to my employer already and said that contingent on what happens tonight, if I am appointed to the council, then I will no longer be working at the Intermission, especially since it's a tipping industry and there's some conflicts of interest with, public officials.
Okay. My second question is the same one that I asked Mr. Brown. How will you ensure that issues are addressed in District 8, and how will your leadership here impact the residents there?
I've been considering different ways to communicate with my constituency. I think there's some IT platforms that would facilitate conversations well. I would have to look into what the rules stipulate for, official communications. But I think that we could definitely streamline that process. And I know that not everyone is able to attend council meetings, and they definitely want to input more than I think they're able to. So that's definitely a priority for me.
Thank you for that.
Mrs. Towle.
Same three questions for you as well as the questions for the first candidate. How will you improve race relations on the city council? And if appointed, how will you do the same with the District 8 community?
As far as race relations, I'm good friends with a lot of people that have spoken to me about issues that matter to them, and the feeling that they're not being heard. And so primarily, I would listen and definitely take suggestion towards how they could feel more included in decision-making processes in the community. Yeah.
Thank you. And the second question, what is your position on closed session meetings?
I believe most actions that the council undertakes are of a public interest and should therefore be conducted publicly.
Okay, thank you. And the final question, how will you represent yourself when faced with tough decisions and your decision may not be the majority?
I am not alien to being on the losing side of an argument, and especially if my principles dictate, I will stand by those principles. So yeah, I have no problem discussing, logically and soundly from a, what may seem to be a losing position.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mr. Peckham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Same question as I asked the first gentleman. 142-page packet, somewhat intimidating, I guess just because of its bulk. What were your thoughts when you encountered that?
When I first encountered it, I was rather intimidated, considering, it could have been just packed with words. But when I dug in and realized what I was facing, I thought it was an interesting challenge, and I'd never really encountered that in-depth of analysis of what's going on in the community. So it was really enlightening, and I look forward to digging into specific issues that I saw in multiple actions.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Joshua. You can have a seat. The next person that I'm calling up is Jennifer Gabriel, please.
Good evening. I'm shaking.
You're doing fine.
So,
We're friendly, most of the time.
and I too had it down to 3 minutes as of 5 o'clock today. I would first like to thank each and every one of you for your commitment to the city of Wausau and all of our residents. Many of you have been on the council for many years. I know you're not looking to be thanked in this position, but it doesn't hurt to hear it every once in a while. What I do with the Wausau School District, I don't do for any gratitude, but it is nice to have that pat on the back every once in a while. I would love to ramble on about how I've prepared to step into the role as a council member. I would love that if I told you that I keep up with the local news, watch council meetings, understand the bureaucratic process, vote in every primary and general election, serve my community, and that I have been a lifelong resident, that those things would be enough for your vote. While those things are important, they are not the things that have prepared me for this role. In fact, I have not prepared for this role at all, and I'm being completely honest. But the more I thought about it, I realized that my family, my friends, my neighbors, my colleagues, and love for my community is what has prepared me for this role. I have found that any thoughts or ideas that I have are almost always made better by someone else. My role at work is to provide engaging activities for students and their families with varying interests. I want to know why or why not they are engaged. I want to know what their interests are outside of our school community that can help them grow. I want to foster a sense of pride within their school community and our neighborhood. I'm fortunate enough to have worked at the school that my son went to for elementary school, and I've been there for 13 years, and I live a block away. So I've got the best of many worlds. An example of this is when families and staff were complaining about an obvious drug dealer across the street from our school at Grant. In gathering their opinions, myself and another parent decided to form a neighborhood watch group. I reached out to Karen Kelbach, and she recommended we first gather as a group to see what path we should take, since she had other concerned residents that were dealing with a similar situation by Wausau West High School. After meeting with police and our neighbors across Bridge Street, we realized our Grant neighborhood problem was minute compared to what was going on with them. We were able to resolve our Grant issue rather quickly, so I continued to meet with the others until their complex situation was resolved, because I was fascinated by the process and wanted to support them in any way I could. I have known Karen since I was 4, and she has modeled a different way to get things done. Not only did she make everyone feel like they had a voice, she genuinely cared about what they had to say and did not give up until everyone saw results. Every day, I make it a point to engage with, listen to, and value every person's opinion and their right to one, regardless of their race, age, religion, employment status, marital status, economic status, etc. I believe every part of our city is important, and I know that hard decisions need to be made that do not always align with what our neighbors want. I also believe we can do better at informing and interacting with our residents. How are we getting to know our neighbors, business owners, and civic servants? How are we promoting our local businesses and opportunities for civic engagement? Are we inviting our neighbors to a city council meeting or neighborhood meeting? Do we know our neighbors' names that have recently moved in near us or even next door to us at times? I believe this is a great community to raise a family, retire, or visit. I also believe we can do better, and I would be grateful for the opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Mrs. Rasmussen.
Geez, I didn't even have to put my light on to be first.
I'm quick.
There's a pattern here. Thank you.
Quicker than people give me credit for.
Same questions. First, thank you for your application. It's great that we have a number of people that are interested in public service. Sometimes that's not the case, so it's great to have you guys all step up. How will you ensure that issues in District 8 are addressed, and how will your leadership in this chamber impact them?
I am very involved in my neighborhood and within the community. I like to attend neighborhood meetings when I get a chance. I haven't in quite some time. They have moved. Just working at the school, I know 140 families that live within a mile of our school. And I do support our local businesses within our district, and I make it a point to do so, and I make it a point to tell my neighbors to do so, and many of them work for those people as well. Yeah. Sorry, I think I forgot the rest of the question.
Mrs. Towle.
Thank you, Mayor. Same questions as the first two candidates. How will you improve race relations on the city council? And if appointed, how will you do the same with the District 8 community?
One beautiful thing about the District 8 community is that it is very diverse. My family is very diverse. My husband is from St. Lucia. My children, I have a son, a 23-year-old son, and a 17-year-old daughter who has her volleyball game tonight. And so they are of mixed race. My neighbors are Southeast Asian. I work with all of our Hispanic families at Grant and our Southeast Asian families. I don't like to label race relations. I just feel like everyone deserves respect, and everyone has something to offer.
Okay, thank you. The second question is, what is your position on closed session meetings?
I would prefer to have everything open to the public. We are a public entity.
Okay, thank you. And the third question, and I want to go back to one of the comments you made in your 3 to 5 minutes. You mentioned that thoughts come from someone else. So my question for you is, how will you represent yourself when sometimes those thoughts may not come from others and they may need to come from yourself? And with the same similar question earlier, how will you deal with tough decisions and when some of those decisions may not be the majority?
Well, these are decisions that we all have to make every day. And at school, sometimes we make decisions that aren't popular for all of our families or all of my students that I work with. I'm okay with that. I do have people disagree with me, and that really doesn't bother me as long as I know what's right and what's moral. What I meant by my first statement was that if I have an idea and I need someone to make it better, I feel like sometimes their input can make my ideas better, sometimes not.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Peckham?
Thank you again. Same question, 142-page packet. Your first thoughts?
There's a lot of maps. A lot of repetitive maps.
We love the maps.
Maps are great. I thought it was interesting. I go to our school board meetings, and I'm involved in things that are required of me through DPI or for the federal food program, so I'm used to a lot of paperwork and very long agendas.
Could we please turn off our phones?
Thank you. Any other questions from the council? All right, Jennifer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next applicant I'm calling up is Linda Lawrence. Hello.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, Tony, Mary Ann, and Ann. Good to see you. We have 3 wonderful candidates who spoke before me, so I'm going to walk out here tonight some way being happy about our district representation. There are basically 3 ways in which I've prepared to be, serving as a District 8 rep again. And the first one is I've lived in the district for over 40 years. I'm observant in terms of who goes where and who does what. We've got 6 schools really in our district. 2 high schools, 2 middle schools, and 2 elementary schools. And that means a lot. We've got a lot of people coming in from other districts who deserve to be safe and feel comfortable in our district. I have 18 years of experience in local government and also experience fundraising for Special Olympics and the League of Women Voters many years ago. So, I've really spent a lot of my life in governance and thinking about how things happen, and some of my favorite topics that were transparency and inclusivity, when I ran for office, and they still are. That's really what makes government work, is that it's not about us who are elected, it's about the people who elect us. And in that light, I certainly wasn't going to do this in the beginning. I was approached and I thought, no, I don't want to be criticized anymore in my life. And then I realized it's not about me, it's about the 3,500 or so people who are in my neighborhood. So, in those 18 years, though, it's not just that I occupied a seat somewhere in this room, but what did I learn from it? I learned a lot about the difference between being a legislative person and being in the executive seat, and what our staff people do. And there are lines between those roles. I read once or heard at a seminar that a legislator has no power without the body that you're a member of. You don't go out there as an alderman and, make sure that the water's clean. You do it as a group and as a team, and it's really important that you can work well together, and I feel that's a strength that I bring to the group. I've also learned a lot about listening, and I think at age 71, I listen a lot more than I used to. The world isn't interested in my opinions constantly, so I've noticed in the last few years that I sit back a lot and I listen to whether it's my family on Christmas Eve or whatever. It's like, yeah, I don't have something to say all the time anymore, and that feels kind of good. The last thing I did was look at the PowerPoint for the budget for next year, and certainly read the packet. I read some committee minutes and things to prepare, just to see what the issues are, and I'll jump on your question right away, Pat, and that is, wow, staff really does a great job putting that packet together. Remember when Dave Cleaver used to come in for a lot of money for GIS, and I thought, oh, what's that? But when you see all the information that you get to make good decisions, you've got all those tools working for you, and you don't have to have the paper brought to your house at the last minute anymore. It's online, so I thought that was good. That's about all I have to say. I'm interested in answering your questions, too. So, Lisa?
Mrs. Rasmussen.
I guess we'll all go in the same order.
Okay.
Talk to us a little bit about how you will ensure that issues in District 8 are addressed and how your leadership here will impact the residents of your district.
Right. I plan to be really accessible, go to the neighborhood meetings, PTA, PTO meetings as I learn about them and as I can. And I'm a big believer in the committee system, and to know who to go to here to get things done. If you need to go through the mayor first, you do that, or a committee chair, or if you can go right to staff. I think it depends on what it is. But again, I go back to my role as a legislator. Whoops, I'm not the mayor and I'm not, the finance director. So you kind of work within the system of people doing their jobs. I think it's important, though, to be accessible so that communication is a two-way street. Thank you.
Mrs. Tao.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself with all of us. Same questions as the first three. The first one is, how will you improve race relations on the city council? And if appointed, how will you do the same within the District 8 community?
I thought a lot about your question since you first asked it, and I don't have a clue about how to address that other than by being a good example with one-on-one relationships on the council, by treating people with respect and not, really looking at gender or race or, economic background or which district you're from. It's how you treat people, and it's really how you move the community forward rather than maybe looking at your own interests. So that's the best answer I can give you. As far as in my district, I'm just going to go back again to, I try to not look at gender or race, but who am I talking to? What do they want? What can I do for them? Instead of, I wouldn't be in any role to really be making a difference in some of the issues that the community faces. But whenever the council has a chance to address that, I'd certainly be in favor of improving inclusivity and diversity in committees and things.
Okay, thank you so much,
Sure.
Linda. And the second question is, what is your position on closed session meetings? I know you have experience, right?
Well,
17,
I'm gonna depart-
18 years.
Yeah.
So what is your position on that?
My position is whenever legal tells us we have a closed meeting, I'm going to trust that we need a closed meeting, whether it's a developer who comes in with an idea, you can't go public yet, it's an HR issue, you can't drag that out into the community. So as few as we need, that would be my best answer, but I really trust that our legal department is going to let us know when we need them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And final question here. How will you represent yourself when faced with tough decisions and your decision may not be the majority?
My funny answer was I'd get out the door as soon as I could. But no, you just move on. You get over it personally. You go with the majority of your team members, of your peers. And, you do your best you can maybe to convince someone to see your point of view, and when that doesn't happen, you move on to the next agenda item or the next meeting. It's over.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Peckham?
You beat me to the question I was going to ask, but I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about how you would handle, we do occasionally find ourselves being criticized. How would you handle that? And go from there, I guess.
I expect it, I guess. Every agenda item affects somebody. It affects a few people if it's an easement, or if it's a sidewalk width issue or something. And some issues affect everybody, not just somebody. So you're going to make somebody unhappy potentially with every vote you take, and it's just how it is. You can't take it personally, nor can you react with any anger or anything to anybody. Not that I've never done that or anything, but I would try real hard. Anything else?
Thank you, Linda.
All right, thank you.
Okay, with everybody having the opportunity to address the council, you have sheets in front of you, and they do have your name on it. This isn't open ballot. There's no secret ballots with this voting. So mark the person that you only mark one that you feel is the best candidate for this position, and I'll come around and collect them. I'll read who voted for whom. Again, it's an open ballot. And then we'll do a tally. If someone has 6 or more, that person will be sworn in immediately and take the seat. If I've got the rankings. If we need to continue down for 3 candidates, down to 2, and then to 1 final. So we'll see where this ends up, and I'll walk everybody through it if there's any questions. Okay, so I collected these in really no particular order, so I'll just read them as the way I have them collected. So we have a vote for Linda Lawrence from Lisa Rasmussen, Linda Lawrence from Dawn Herbst, Tony Brown from Mary Tao, Dennis Smith for Linda Lawrence, Pat Peckham, Joshua Dirks, Michael Martins for Jennifer Gabriel, David Nutting for Linda Lawrence, Tom Neal for Linda Lawrence, Gary Gisselman for Linda Lawrence, and Becky McElhaney for Jennifer Gabriel. So that does cease the voting right there. We have Linda Lawrence at 6 votes. Thank you, everybody. Congratulations. Yep.
And Ms. Lawrence, if you'd like to come forward for your oath of office, please. And thank you to all the other candidates, all outstanding, and thank you for your willingness to serve.
You're at District 8 between Rasmussen and Dirksen. And if you just stand there, I will read you your oath, and then I'm going to go through a couple things real quick for you to give you the tutorial of the voting system. Raise your right hand. I'll read the oath, and you just affirm. Okay. I, Linda Lawrence, who have been appointed to fill the unexpired term of District 8 alderperson ending April 20th, 2020, in and for the city of Wausau and Marathon County, but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof, swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of this office to the best of my abilities, so help me God. Wonderful. And then if I could have you sign right there, and I'll fill in the remainder with your name on there. Congratulations, Linda.
Welcome, Ms. Lawrence. And again, to the other candidates, thank you all so very much. All right, now we proceed forward.
May I
Oh, go ahead.
Speaking there, I just want to address a couple things, and Lisa and Dawn can obviously help you. You have 4 buttons in front of you. The RTS is your request to speak, and we do call people. I keep track of it, and we try to do it in chronological order, whomever hit the button first. When we do the voting, I wait till I say begin voting, and then you can press your button, and then we wait till everyone's done. I get an indication, and then we call the vote from there. Obviously, yes is for the resolution or ordinance, no is against it, and the ABS, the yellow light, is for abstentions. One more thing real quick, if you would please contact our office tomorrow, I can go through a lot more orientation and introductions, get you an iPad, email, all those other things, and contact information. And I think I covered everything. Thank you.
Alrighty then. Moving forward for public comment, we have 8 residents registered to speak tonight. When you come forward, please, if I could ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and your name and your address for the record, please. We'll start off with Mr. Lou Larson, please.
Thank you. I'm Lou Larson. I reside at 904 South 21st Place. I also have a property on 212 Thomas Street, or 216 Thomas Street. I'm up here in regards to the testing, the citizen testing of Riverside Park. I guess first and foremost, I'm surprised that the city has not been on top of this for all these decades, that this problem, given the problem with the Riverview area, the Riverview, the cancer that's been going on in the neighborhood, and with the continuing pollution from 3M. And I also kind of questionable about why you spend all this money on the River Life project, but when you come to Riverside Park, there's no money for testing, especially when you're planning to put your River Life trail through there. You know, you would think you would want that safe. I know myself, I would like to see the park safe. I have grandkids that use that park. And if it's going to be further exposed for traffic through there, I'm sure you would want it to be safe. I therefore would fully advise that if you, the citizens, you're not going to test it, let the citizens do it. I would also, where am I at here? I'm also saying that to wait for a Waleco's test to come through, to me, is like a drunk driver, you know, taking his own sobriety test. So let the citizens test the park or close it down until you can prove that it's safe. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, please, is Ms. Catherine Cronenwetter.
Catherine Cronenwetter, 117 Sturgeon A Road. I'm in Mr. Peckham's district. I'm not in the Thomas Street area, but I have certainly used that park. So I would like to speak for allowing the citizen group to do their testing. I think I have heard the specter of liability brought up as a reason why the city should not test. I would argue if there is liability, according to that sign behind you, integrity and accountability and service to your citizens, that liability already exists if there is a problem in that park. And if it doesn't exist, which is what I hope, the testing shows that there is no issue and the park can be used as it is today, all the better. Let's close this issue and let it go away, or realize that we need to do something about this park so that it is safe for the kids who play there and the people who walk there, and the improvements we want to do on the riverfront. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Patricia Runke, please.
Patricia Runke, address is 1130 Grand Avenue in Wausau. I'm also in District 1, not on Thomas Street, but I mostly just came here today to also support the testing at the park. It's a lot of what Catherine just said. if there is a problem, I feel like that should be looked into, and especially if it's not costing the city anything, I can't really think of a good reason why it shouldn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Allison Runke. Good evening.
Good evening. Allison Runke. I also reside at 117 Sturgeon Eddy Road in Peckham's district, not quite in the Thomas Street area, but I personally frequent that area very much. I also frequent the downtown area, and it is within my personal concern to make sure that our area as a community is safe to be living in and adventuring in, a good place for small children to be able to stay safe. And I don't see personally any good reason to ignore the concerns of the community and to ignore the safety and potential hazard of not testing what we could test. I have a little 2-year-old cousin now who I have been taking all around town. It would kill me inside if something were to happen because of some unknown issue that we continue to ignore and just pretend isn't an issue. So I would rather, test it and know that there's not an issue than ignore it and risk someone getting hurt. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Judith Miller.
Good evening. Judith Miller, 903 Kickbush Street, Wausau. Let me say that while I am here to speak about the request of Citizens for a Clean Wausau to conduct private testing in Riverside Park, let me say first that while some would argue that this might reveal liability for the city of Wausau, I would argue that if contamination of a significant nature is found, the next logical step, as Ms. Rasmussen has said in a prior meeting on this subject, would be to pursue the people who created that contamination and perhaps file suit against them requesting damages and the costs of remediation. That would seem the most logical process. I would also argue and urge you, please, that Riverside Park should be closed until the actual risk is known. As things stand, adults, children, and companion animals are being exposed to an unknown and unassessed risk. While some might argue that people and pets have been going to the park for decades now, I do not see that that fact justifies continuing to expose the populace to, again, an unknown, unassessed risk that can be prevented. And the fact that we may soon have snow, another objection I have heard to closing the park on the ground, is not sufficient deterrent to people using the park. We do not know when the snow will come. We do not know how long it will last, how deep it will be, or when the thaw will occur. And I would say, and I will tell you that when I had my dogs, the snow never deterred me. After all, this is Wisconsin, and most of us come equipped with boots. Again, I would urge you, please, to allow Citizens for a Clean Wausau to conduct the testing so that we know what the risk may actually be. And I would ask you for a resolution to close the park until the risk can be determined and addressed if need be. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Tom Killian.
Good evening. Thomas Killian, 133 East Thomas Street, Wausau, and also a volunteer for Citizens for a Clean Wausau. It has been over a year and a half now that residents and regular folks in this community have been strung along through a process and deliberation regarding testing in Riverside Park. The city, triggering delay after delay, now appears to have never intended to pursue their own testing in the park in a timely fashion, as residents were led to believe. Keep in mind that the community, and by that I mean the people you are all here to serve, were told explicitly and on video by Mayor Robert Milkey himself that the testing could not move forward this year because of money. But it was shortly after this assertion that City Hall's hollow public relations narrative on this matter fell apart, when citizens stepped up to fund testing in the park and to assist the city with the burden it claimed it could not meet. We all learned that this whole sequence of delays and resistance from the city, and I mean City Hall, not the true city, its people and its community, was actually over concerns and of liability. Now, liability can often have two common meanings. One is the state of being responsible for something, especially by law. That is what the municipal corporation claims it fears currently, I believe. Another meaning is a person or thing whose presence or behavior is likely to cause embarrassment. And that is what those of you who would tonight vote against the request for access to our public park for testing should earn. The embarrassment and shame of turning your backs on regular people, common neighborhoods, and environmental standards. If community and service to community mean anything in this building we occupy tonight, which is really intended to be the people's hall, not a hall for empty assertions of politicians, then the vote for access should be unanimous in the affirmative. Thank you.
Next up, Ms. Terry Killian.
Hello, everyone. My name is Terry Killian. I reside in Alderman Nutting's district at 133 East Thomas Street in Wausau. I haven't felt good for a couple of weeks, so you'll have to forgive me if I don't speak well. But this was an important meeting, and I wanted to be here. Our Mayor Milky indicated in a public message on September 3rd, 2019, that, quote, "Folks can take their testing wherever they want. I could care less. Show it, make it open and transparent." Our Mayor Milky was very clear that the reason the city could not test was because of lack of funding. Our Mayor Milky, in his re-election announcement, indicated that his words can be trusted. Therefore, trusting in Mayor Milky's words, and because of the critical importance for users of Riverside Park to know that it is a park that meets environmental standards for outdoor relaxation and enjoyment for adults, children, and animals. The citizens took financial responsibility upon themselves to ensure that is the case. That type of genuine concern for someone's neighbors and friends is not common in this day and age. That type of genuine concern is to be commended and supported. If this council does not support citizen testing of the soils in the park, I believe that this will prove to be unacceptable to the majority of the residents of this city. Therefore, I strongly encourage your support for citizens to access Riverside Park to test the soil.
Thank you. And Ms. Rita Pockel.
Hello. Rita Pockel, 1310 Maple Hill Road. I live in District 6. I am only here to ask you to please let the citizens for Clean Wausau to access Riverside Park for soil testing. Please vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Then moving on to the consent agenda, starting with file number 19-1001 from the City Council, the minutes of the previous council meeting from October 8th, and ending with file number 82-1252 from SISM, ordinance amending section 1.01.025C1B, schedule of cash deposits. I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda. Motion by Mr. Gisselman, second by Mr. Neal.
Begin voting. That motion has passed unanimously.
Then moving on to the resolutions and ordinances, starting with the file number 19-1003 for the mayor's appointments. There are none this evening. Moving on to file number 19-021 from Parks and Recreation Committee, the resolution approving the request by the Citizens for a Clean Wausau to access Riverside Park for soil testing. Parks and Rec approved this 5-0. I will entertain a motion to accept. Oh, Mr. Peckham?
We should have a motion.
I was about to say. Ms. McElhaney and second, Mr. Gisselman. Mr. Peckham?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think, obviously, this has been frustrating for the community, and it's also been frustrating for the committee members who, as has been pointed out more than once, have talked about this topic probably at our last 7 meetings in a row. But I think the deliberation has been good in that we've kind of sifted through the possibilities of what kind of testing we could do, and frankly, how much money we'd need to spend in order to get some peace of mind for the community as a whole and the users of, the folks in that neighborhood. We started out at about $71,000, and we were testing all over the place. But we've had a constructive relationship, for the most part, I think, with the Citizens for Clean Wausau. And we've kind of gravitated to doing surface soil testing, which makes perfect sense because that's the soil that users of the park are going to actually encounter. When we started out, we were going to go down, we were doing surface soil testing, we were going to do vapor analysis, and we were going to go down 3 or 4 feet, then we're going to check the groundwater. And the standard, the regular user of the park is never going to encounter that. So I think for starters, I think surface soil testing is a very good idea. I do not think we're going to get any clarity from 3 tests at the base of the hill as has been proposed. I do think that we should approve those tests, however, and when we know more about Walico's results and whether they might be required to do further tests, I think the city should be responsible for actually testing out in the area of the park where more people are going to use it. The 3 spots proposed for testing are way off, practically in the bushes. They are in the lowest spot, and they're probably the most likely to turn up any contamination. But I think we need tests out near the footpath, the River Edge Trail, and, like in the middle of the area where people would be, throwing a stick for their dog or whatever. Anyway, I hope we can get this supported. I do not want to be part of a body that is afraid to look for fear of what we might find. I think we need to look, and I think I was encouraged by the contents of the packet in terms of determining liability if something is found. And I think that this community, this city government, can pony up the money for resolving the problem if we find one. I don't think there's going to be one, but we need to be able to, if somebody asks us if that's safe down there, we need to be able to say yes. And right now, we can't say yes. I think it is safe. I don't have any problem going down there, but somebody says, is it safe? I can't say yes. So let's get to that point.
Ms. McElhaney?
It's well known that I have supported testing, and I kind of find it shameful that Wausau isn't doing this. The city of Wausau definitely has respect, accountability, and integrity. It does that. And we form a government, we choose to live in a community that has a government where we pool our resources, and we expect that government to provide public health and safety. And I don't believe we've done that. I think we've circled the wagons at times. I think there is a lot, as Pat says, there's a lot of, conflicting information, but that doesn't stop us from going forward and testing, because in my estimation, in looking through everything, including all the CCW's information, everything that we've had, I can't say that I would want to go there. I can't say that I want my kids, if they were smaller, to go there. Do I want my dogs walking there? If I can't say that, then nobody should have to say that. And I hope this goes through, because I can't imagine a reason not to. If it comes up that there's waste or there's contamination, we'll deal with it, because that's our duty to the residents and who are the taxpayers and who use the park and who pay our taxes and say, protect us. We're pooling our taxes, protect us. It's been such a long fight, and some of you know that, and it's just so frustrating to me, because this just seems like a non-issue. It doesn't matter who caused this problem. I don't care. We can go back and go after them. We have DNR looking at Waleco. There might be, the city may have done something. That's not on us. It's just on us to protect the citizens from here on out. Those issues will all get clearer as we know what's going on. But I just feel I voted against the Thomas Street issue, the Thomas Street thing, because of this issue. I just feel this has been kind of a cloud over us, and I apologize for people, but I'm definitely voting for this. I hope we all do. The citizens of Wausau deserve it. Thank you.
Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been a supporter, proponent of testing for quite a while now, in large part because of my respect for the efforts of the community. The citizens group that has come forward spent a lot of time and actually been a great resource for us. So I applaud their work. And we've had some discussions about, let's just wait and see until the DNR report comes back. And if there's no red flags there, then maybe we just don't have to do this. Okay, I'm going to put my, future-telling hat on right now and tell you that even if that report comes back without a single red flag, this is not going to go away magically. The concern will still be there. And to echo, I think, what Mr. Peckham said, I don't want to be a part of a group who has shut the door on a grassroots effort that has been months, years in developing a compelling argument for let's look at this. I hope, and I think I also agree with Mr. Peckham, I think that we'll come up with results from the citizens testing that shows there might be some stuff in the ground, but it's going to be below limits that are dangerous or a concern. I certainly hope that's the case. But as Alder McElhaney said, if there is something there, then we'll deal with it. That's our job. So I will vote for this. I hope everybody votes for this, because you just can't say no to this effort, and you can't pretend that it'll go away.
Mrs. Rasmussen.
Thank you. Now, I can respect the fact that I think everybody's heart's in the right place when we talk about Riverside Park and we want safe places for people to go and play. And I have all along believed that Citizens for a Clean Wausau's heart is in the right place, because that's all they want. But I think throughout this process, the citizen group has not recognized that the city and the DNR are not their enemy. The common enemy for Citizens for a Clean Wausau, the city and the DNR, is the polluter. And at the end of the day, we all should be working together towards the same end, and that's holding private sector polluters accountable and making them responsible for situations that they've created, either through careless disposition methods, lack of knowledge, lack of caring, whatever it was. But whatever's in there's been in there for a long time. And maybe there's nothing in there, we don't know. But I think that all of us working to the same end also includes doing things in the right order. And Wausau is already testing. Their report coming out is imminent. Depending on the findings of their report, if their report does show findings of elements that need to be remediated, that already creates a documented trail of environmental liability for them. Why would we not camp on to that effort? It is not the job of every taxpayer in this city to clean up the mess that the private sector has made. And so if we allow premature testing, whether we do it, whether the citizen group does it, if we allow for premature testing, and those results are not what we want to hear, do we still have to deal with it? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, if you find it first, it's going to be your responsibility to prove that the private sector polluter did it. And you have the time, the expense, and the legal fees necessary for that. You're now in a defensive position. You have to prove you didn't do it, rather than having any documentation ahead of time to demonstrate that there's a documented testing trail from Wausau samples showing that they were already on this path, that the environmental liability was already trending their way. Now, we have been advised through communications received last week by 2 attorneys, our city attorney and an outside counsel, not to not test. We've been advised to just wait. Wait for Wausau's results. Let their results be known, and then make a decision. No one said we can't test. No one said they can't test. But I think if we get ahead of ourselves and we don't wait for, what happens is if Wausau's test results are negative, or I guess present the pollution in a negative light, that there's something in there that needs to be remediated, it's the DNR's job to hold them accountable. And that relieves all of our taxpayers of the duty to either clean it up or pay to fight to prove that somebody else did this. It should not be every taxpayer's job to make good on what the private sector created. And I think if we work together and we do things in the right order, if there's liability to be assumed, we can get that liability imposed on the private sector where it belongs. We all share a desire for safe parks. We want safe places for people to go. I think that Ms. Miller's suggestion that if we are that concerned about pollutants, maybe it's not such a bad idea to close that park until we know. Maybe if people are that concerned that it's unsafe, maybe that needs to happen. But I think if we get ahead of ourselves and we all start testing too soon, and we don't wait for that report, we then invite all of the expense that we're going to incur as a result of proving that somebody else put it there. If all the results come back and they're negative and there's nothing in there and the place is safe, awesome. But what if it isn't? I mean, we all want the same thing, and we've been fighting each other for over a year. We've been accusing each other of things. We've been accusing each other of having awful opinions of one another. We've been accusing each other of not caring about people. None of that's the case. We all want the right thing. It's just a matter of how we get there. And I think if we move forward too quickly against our own legal advice, and we can't wait just a couple more months to see what Wausau's report shows us, what have we gained? We may sustain a huge financial responsibility. We put our residents at a huge financial risk when we may not have to. And all we are being asked for by our legal team is some time. Our environmental representatives, our engineers, have advised us and the Park and Rec Committee, we just need some time. Private sector is already underway on this testing. They're not fighting it, they're testing. We just need to wait a little bit. I also support testing, but not today and not tomorrow, in the right order. And so if the resolution here is for us to authorize CCW to test immediately, I'm going to vote no. And I'm sorry if people don't agree. But I will not put us at legal and financial risk when I know that we don't have to do that.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've listened to Lisa Rasmussen talk about this, and I would like to remind her that we have already been waiting a long time that this subject didn't come up last Wednesday, and now we're trying to do something about it. We've been goofing around with this thing forever. And as far as if Waleco's tests turn up something and the Citizens for Clean Wausau tests turn up something, I don't know how that impacts one another. I don't know how the city could be accused of polluting it. Anyway, we don't produce any pollutants, I don't think. Maybe we did in the past, and maybe we are somewhat responsible, and maybe we are going to have to clean it up. It's not, as Lisa said, it's not the responsibility of citizens to clean it up. It's our responsibility to make sure our citizens are safe. That's our responsibility. And I think a big step would let the Citizens of Clean Wausau test. We'll find out what Waleco has to say, and we'll move on. And as Becky said, if there's something there, we'll deal with it. Somehow, all of a sudden, we don't want to spend any money on legal fees. Well, we're always going to have money on legal fees. We have a number of suits going on now. So we just stop those so we don't have to spend any money on legal fees? It doesn't make any sense. I'm going to support this. I've always supported it. I've walked up and down that park a number of times. It's not even in my district. But I'm concerned about the people of Wausau, all of them, whether they're my constituents or not. And I think we have to move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Neal.
Thanks again, Mr. Mayor. We can't confuse two different issues. One is looking at, the source of possible pollution, who's to blame and who's responsible and who's supposed to clean it up. That's one thing that we would have to deal with when we get to that intersection in the road. I maintain that the citizens groups testing is not a redundant test regimen from what Waleco's been doing. It's an additional source of knowledge that goes into the pot. I would venture to say, and I'm 100% sure, that if said Waleco DNR report comes back clean as a whistle, there's no exceedances, we've just got some minor background stuff here, that our citizens group is not going to just go, oh, well, we're done. Thank you. Boy, we wasted our time. Because I think that they do have reason for concern. And I cannot see us closing the door on them when they have offered to bring the money, bring the expertise, do the testing, and give us their results in a process that we can respect, and maybe even look at with a less jaundiced eye than we might look at testing being done by the possible perpetrator of said possible pollution. So, no, we cannot just say no to this group because our legal team tells us there could be some liability issues. I understand that that's their job. That's what they must do for the government of Wausau, which is an extension of the people of Wausau. And I know that is their best, thinking from what their job is. But our job is a little bit different, too. We're responding to the voice of the people. And that is our primary responsibility. Secondary to that is concerns about the taxpayer, what they might have to kick in to remediate if it's found that it is our job to remediate. But we're not there yet. We will get to the point, if there is remediation needed, then who is responsible for it? It's a whole separate discussion. It's a whole separate consideration. So we cannot conflate the two. So I continue to support this, and I hope that we see it for what it is and not try to combine something else into this vote.
Mrs. Tell.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the rest of the council members for sharing your concerns tonight. I want to talk from the perspective of being a council member and a citizen that lives 5 blocks away from the Riverside Park. And Tom Killian's right. About 18 months ago, that's how long we've been, kind of running around in circles with this situation. 18 months ago, I was elected to my seat, and I was unaware of the concerns of the Waleco site. I bought my home there in 2014. as soon as I joined the council and I was aware and privy to that information, I immediately emailed Tony Rayala and the Mayor Milky, and I gave them some, weird excuse that I may potentially be leaving District 10. But really, the true reason was that I was scared. I did not want to own a home right there in District 10. I thought about the entire Hmong community that used to play volleyball and soccer at Riverside Park, myself being one of them, an avid volleyball player that would frequent Riverside Park all year round. We even played volleyball on the court up when the snow was falling, when there was ice. And when I thought about all the information that I would be learning, it was very alarming and very concerning. I want to share some perspectives from the Hmong community with all of you. 30 to 35 years ago, there was a series of cancer that had plagued some of the Hmong individuals in our community. Being that we were new to, America, to Wausau, they weren't sure why, all of a sudden 5 people would all of a sudden die of cancer. I'm not saying that it's related to this situation, but these are people that lived in District 10, people that lived in District 3, people who frequent that park. Till this day, we don't have answers. That's really the Her family, for those of you who are aware. Until today, they still wonder what happened to their mom, their dad, their cousins, and their uncles. And so when I think about this, and I think about living 5 blocks away from Riverside Park, I think about our responsibility, our service to our citizens. I think about our opportunity here to bring about safety to our citizens so it's not questioned. Make sure that their well-being is part of our decision-making and that we are here to serve and protect. So I will be voting yes on this resolution tonight. And I would urge all of you to listen to the 8 people that have come forward to share their opinions or experience or comments with all of us and all the great work that they have done from the groundswell up. Thank you.
Mrs. Rasmussen.
Thank you. Before we vote on the matter, I think that it would behoove us to hear from both Eric Lindman, who's been working the situation pretty much from day one, and from the city attorney who dispensed some advice to us last week on this matter. And not to put the city attorney on the spot to give her client legal advice in public, but I do want both of them to talk a little bit about burden of proof and what it means to find your way out from under the results of premature testing. So I guess if we could have Eric come first, and then maybe the city attorney if she wants to follow.
Yeah, hi, good evening. My conversations with the DNR to this point is they're very adamant that there's not any known link to the dioxin testing that has been done back to Waleco. And so dioxins are, according to the DNR, were not generated by Waleco. There's no proof that they were generated by Waleco, and there's no connection there. So, the information that I'm providing to the city council is trying to provide you as much information as we can so you can make an educated decision on, if you allow the testing, what the liability is. If you understand the regulatory agency, they don't move quickly. They don't. And I realize that's frustrating. It always has been, and it always will be. But they are working through a process, and it is slow. They have verbally told me on the phone that they will be providing us a letter as well, because the city has had an incinerator in the past at the wastewater treatment facility. The city used to collect its own solid waste, and they used to burn some of it down there. So they're going to be requiring the city to do the same type of aerial deposition study that Waleco just went through. And based on that study, it's probably a safe bet that the city will have to do testing in that area. based on whatever that aerial deposition study is. So there are things that are moving forward, and again, they are slow. The one thing is if, right now, because there's not a link to Waleco or other private entity with relation to the dioxins, that, the city owns that property. If it's tested, if it's determined that there's a health risk, the city at this point either can try to legally take that stance and prove that Waleco did it, or another 3M or another entity, industrial entity, or we would take the liability and correct the situation. So, that's in the memos and the different things, that's the information that, I guess, in a nutshell, I've been trying to establish to the city council, and get you as much information as I can so you can make an informed decision.
Thank you, Lisa, for this opportunity. And I want to say also that whenever I do my job, you should know that I take nothing personally. It's not my personal opinion whether you should or should not grant this request. That's not my role. So I make no personal opinion about whether you should or you shouldn't, or I hold nothing personal against the requester that made this request. But as Mr. Neal pointed out, and I thank you for saying that because you were exactly right, my role, thank you for recognizing my role is different than yours. You're legislators and you're here to make those decisions. And my job is like what Eric just said, it's to provide you the most expert advice and information upon which you can make the best informed decision. If you're doing something illegal, hopefully I will be able to tell you that. Granting their request is not illegal, but it doesn't come without some potential risk that may be very minimal. It may not be minimal, I don't know, but I feel it's my job to inform you of those risks and the applicable statutes so that you can make your own decision. So I have no personal opinion on whether you grant this request or not. I just felt that you needed to be, it was my job to make you as best formed as I possibly could in making the decision. So thank you for recognizing that and giving me the opportunity to say this. And I'll tag on to what Eric said. The most conservative approach to eliminate, you may not eliminate all liability or risk, but to reduce it to a point beyond which approving this request would go would require that we wait, like Lisa described, and see if Waleco's test results reveal something that may be linked back to them in Riverside Park, so then the DNR maintains enforcement authority over that and would link that contamination to an already open case rather than opening a new case. But it's really as simple as that. It's a question of how much risk you're willing to assume in making your decision. So thank you.
Mr. Peckham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for allowing this conversation to go on as long as you have.
Even bringing it forward in the first place.
I just want to point out that the Park and Rec Committee has been dealing with this primarily, and we have already taken the advice of legal and engineering, and we voted at our last meeting to hold off on having the city conduct any testing until we find out what Waleco is going to come up with. But then at the same time, we've got a citizen group that says, hey, let us in there and let's do it. So the committee was unanimous in favor of that. I'm not optimistic that the DNR is going to give us any relief on this based on their wind studies and all their other falderall they went through. They only tested the surface soil in one spot in Riverside Park. And so with that in mind, I am wondering, if sufficient levels of contamination are found, what the DNR might do from there. And so the results from the testing were submitted to them in September. They're supposed to come out with some kind of a statement in November. And I wasn't really fishing, but I said, and to the hydrogeologist, they said, so that's when you're going to say whether more testing is going to be required, right? Well, it's too early to say that. And I asked him again, and I said, you know, you're going to come up with something in November. Isn't it going to tell us whether more testing was required? No, well, it's too early to say that. So you got one test. It doesn't appear that the DNR is convinced there's any big hotspot down there, which perhaps should give us comfort. But it also tells me that if they do ask for additional testing, which I'm not sure they will, probably not going to be down there. So I think we need to, I don't know if there's any possibility at all of getting some kind of an agreement on who's liable before the testing occurs, but I think the citizen testing should proceed.
Mr. Nutting.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is for me, it's a difficult decision because I represent the citizens that are bringing this forward, and I sincerely respect CCW's work and leadership and passion for this effort. And yeah, but I represent also the entire city and then the needs and concerns and the well-being of the entire city. And I'll one-up you, Alderperson Tao, as you live 5 blocks away. I live 1 block away, and I've lived there since 1983. And I've raised 4 children, and we frequent the park and run our dogs, and our dogs have lived until 16 years of age, and we're down there a lot, and we've witnessed the families playing volleyball and baseball and the picnics that have occurred there. And I personally don't believe there's a problem at the park, and I'd like to hope that that is the case. And appreciate the park, and have used it and swam at McDonald's pool there back in the 60s. So it's been a part of my life. I'm wondering, Mr. Mayor, if I could ask one question of Mr. Killian. Mr. Killian, if I could ask you to come up. Is it necessary to test now, or can the tests wait 2-3 months or whatever, or to spring? Why now?
That's a very good question, Mr. Nutting. Why now is because it's been 18 months of delay, and when you tack that on to 35 years of delay, not just by the city of Wausau, but by the DNR and state toxicologists in Madison, we've got some interesting documents there. It's overdue, sir. It should have been done years ago, I believe.
But I don't think we've been waiting 35 years. I don't think this was really on anybody's radar until it was brought up to you. I didn't know anything about it, having lived there all my life, and it was. But I'm appreciative of the effort that's been brought forward. But it's not that we've been waiting 35 years. It's not been on anyone's radar, honestly.
That's not precisely the case, sir. That would be a very long story, but in the city of Wausau, in the private sector, the contamination problem was discovered in 1978 by Crestline.
Well, I'm just talking about that park, not further around where there are.
That would be 2006. So, yeah, the DNR was made aware of these levels in 2008 at the same time of the city of Wausau, and they were aware that there were exceedances of state standards, and these are substantial exceedances of state standards, not only residential, but in one case in the park, they actually exceeded industrial standards.
But what I just wanted to ask you, sir, was that no one's against testing. I'm not against testing. I made the motion on the Parks and Recreation Committee to proceed with this. I made the motion, I'm for this. But does it have to be before we receive other information? That's where I'm torn right now.
May I have 60 seconds to address that?
Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Neal, I think, had some very good points that were correct. And there was one factual inaccuracy from Ms. Rasmussen. But what Mr. Neal said about, just because we get Waleco's results, is that going to alleviate citizen concerns or even perhaps some independent scientist concerns? Absolutely not. Sentry Insurance and Waleco should have done these tests a long time ago. They did not. And with the Waleco, and this is the key here, and I think everyone needs to really take a breath and listen to this, because this is the crux of it. The Waleco study is an aerial deposition study due to decades of burning when that facility was in operation. Now that's like comparing apples and oranges to what we're suggesting we test, which is actually based on a stormwater and runoff issue. So you are looking at two completely different studies which really have no relationship to one another, and our group has actually registered several serious questions and concerns with the design of that study that Waleco did. So whatever the case with that, I mean, we would just be back here next month, the month after that, a year after that, and yes, it's time, and it's time out of respect for families who had a lot more concern even prior to the group's formation in the neighborhood. It's due time, I think.
Thank you for your replies. I will vote for allowing this testing to go forward. I represent the community. I represent this park. I personally don't believe there's a problem, and that's me. I've lived in front of it. I've walked it. I don't have any problem walking the trail, rolling around in the grass, no problem whatsoever. But we'll allow you to do these tests.
Thank you. I think that's honorable. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any further discussion, you may begin voting. That motion has passed 8-3.
Moving on to file number 19-1014, a resolution of the Capital Improvements and Street Maintenance Committee approving an easement for a fiber network at 110 East Thomas Street. This is for TDS Telecom. Committee action approved 2-1. The fiscal impact will be a lump sum payment of $7,500 to the city. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Gisselman. Do I have a second by Mrs. Rasmussen?
Begin voting. Motion has passed 10-1.
File number 74-0620, an ordinance of the Capital Improvements and Street Maintenance Committee amending Section 10.20.030 ACD, all night parking concern overnight restrictions on the 600 block of South 7th Avenue and the 600 and a portion of the 700 block of South 6th Avenue. Committee action approved 3-0. The fiscal impact will be minimal to place signs. I'll entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Nutting. Do I have a second? By Ms. Herbst.
Begin voting. Motion has passed unanimously.
File number 19-0814, a joint resolution of the Capital Improvement and Street Maintenance Committee and the Plan Commission approving a relocation order for establishing an access road off Thomas Street in order to repair and maintain the river wall. Committee action, SISM approved 2-1. The Plan Commission approved 7-0. The fiscal impact is estimated $1,000. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Ms. Herbst. Do I have a second by Mr. Peckham?
Begin voting. Motion has passed 10-1.
File number 19-1012, a resolution of the Economic Development Committee approving assignment and assumption of various limited liability companies associated with Blanker Company's ownership of the Thomas Street Phase 1 remnant parcels to Vested Nest LLC and/or their associated or assigned companies, and waiving the city's first right of refusal to allow the sale of said parcels. Committee action approved 4-0. The fiscal impact will be none. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Peckham, second by Mr. Nutting. Mrs. Towle.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. So with the purchase agreement that's attached to the packet, does the development agreement, is that still attached to Blanker Construction, or does that follow to the new the new owner?
And Chris Schock, our economic developer.
I didn't see it in the purchase agreement, so I just thought I asked the question.
Yeah, sure. Great question. I guess the answer is both. Blenker will remain a party to the agreement till the completion of the ninth property, but the agreement will be assigned to the new owner for any ongoing issues associated with the project, which there aren't many because it's essentially complete.
And when is the project completion supposed to be?
Well, I'm not exactly, I don't know what the end project completion is off the top of my head from the agreement, but obviously as I had mentioned earlier in your question that you had emailed, the mortgage or the piece that's tied to the forgivable loan portion was tied to a value that's essentially 6 buildings.
Yeah, my question was, okay, so you don't know the end completion date, and if I refer to a development agreement, there was like a few different dates on there. There's a date of like 2024 for project completion?
That
Okay.
sounds correct, yes.
Okay.
It will obviously be done well ahead of that date,
Okay.
but there
But
is
by
a deadline
contract-
date which is in the agreement.
But by the development agreement, this new ownership, they could potentially have until 2024 to finish the other 4.
Yeah,
Units,
Blenker
right?
or the new,
Right.
Blenker or the new
Okay.
owner.
Okay, so,
The same owner today. It doesn't
Correct.
change the date.
correct. I understand that. My other question.
But just to be clear, they're already, they're already progressing with the additional units. I've already started, as you can see. So, obviously, they're well ahead of schedule to complete them by 2024, but they do have until 2024 to complete them.
Okay, I appreciate that perspective. That's what I wanted to share with everyone, that even though there's that transfer of ownership, they have until 2024, didn't matter if it stayed with Blinker or if it went
That's
to
right.
this new entity. That's just good factual information to know while we're making our decision tonight. And then you did share that the $290,000 loan that's forgivable that was given, there was a draw, so there was an execution of that.
Yes.
Okay, and
And there's a mortgage against the, sites, which is forgiven when it reaches the construction value limit, which we expect will be reached this month.
Okay. And I understand that. What confused me is that the response from you is that the whole 290 would be forgivable, right? Because they have the 6 units built today. That was in the developer agreement. But I also read, it's on page 112 in the packet, but in the development agreement, it's like section 3, sub B, sub 3, where it talks about a forgiveness up to the $49,837. What's that? We can pull it up. There's an amount in there. Section 3, sub B, sub 3. It says 49,380 up to that would be forgiven when the 6th unit is completed. So I'm just confused at that part.
Would it help you?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I have it on the thing, but we can.
Just explain what that up to
Sure.
$49,000 is. It's in the same development agreement I've received from one
Wait,
of your
sorry.
staff and
No,
from
this
yours.
isn't the, yeah,
Oh,
this is
I
just the
apologize.
purchase agreement. It's okay. And again, we answered a variety of development agreement questions today. You didn't present this one earlier. We're glad to answer it, though. I don't have the agreement exactly in front of me. Though
I
we
can show you, I have it right here pulled up in an email, and I will tell you exactly where to
I
go.
think I have it, too.
Okay.
Is that figure by chance the reverse TID increment? Is there reverse TID increment on the project at all?
It's under forgivable loan section, and it says the city agrees to forgive up to $49,833.33 of loan principal upon the completion of each building on the property with respect to each of the first 6 buildings constructed on
Yes,
the property.
okay, sorry, yeah, no, thank you for reading it, yes. So that totals, we forgive 49,000 on each building until it tallies the $299,000. So each property of the 6,
Okay. So that's,
49,000.
It becomes the forgiveness formula.
That's right. That's how you forgive it on each property. So for example, if, on each building, it totals that amount.
so it totals at 290,000.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Well, that was the clarification
Yeah,
that
no,
I
I'm glad to provide it.
was
But
requesting
That's
for.
the 49 that's how you came to the 299 was each building is worth 49. You add it up, gets to the 299. If they were seeking forgiveness, for example, on a piece of the property without the other pieces, you could forgive it 49,000 at a time. In this case, they're selling the units, and they've completed or they're completing the 6 units, so it will be forgiven at one time, as long as it meets that.
I think the other purpose of a formula like that is it releases funds from the developers so that they're free to, it uncumbers that property so that they could
Correct.
use it for another
Correct.
development.
And that's what we do with all projects, is usually, things are forgiven on some kind of schedule. So that's the schedule. It does free up funds. They've not taken advantage of that. They've not asked for forgivenesses along the way in the first properties that were built, first structures.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Is that it? Okay.
We have a motion by Peckham, second by Nutting. You may begin voting. Motion has passed 10-1.
File number 18-1109, a resolution of the Finance Committee approving the 2019 budget modification of the Public Works of various street projects. Committee action approved 4-0. Fiscal impact, there is no increase in the budget. I'll entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mrs. Rasmussen, second by Mr. Nutting.
Begin voting. That motion has passed unanimously.
File number 19-1019, a resolution of the Human Resources Committee authorizing reclassification of the Bus Mechanic 1 to Bus Mechanic 2. Committee action approved 5-0. The fiscal impact will be none. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Ms. Herbst, second by Mr. Martins.
Begin voting. Motion has passed unanimously.
Moving forward is suspend the Rule 1D, transmission of committee business to council. For the items marked pending committee action, 2/3 vote will be required. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Neal. Do I have a second? By Mrs. Towle.
Begin voting. That motion has passed unanimously.
File number 18-1109, a resolution of the Finance Committee approving the 2019 budget modification of the Public Works traffic lines and signs. Committee action approved 4-0. Fiscal impact will be increasing the budget of $27,800. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mrs. Rasmussen. Do I have a second? By Ms. Herbst.
Begin voting. That motion has passed unanimously.
File number 19-1020, a joint resolution of the Human Resources Committee and the Finance Committee reclassifying the evidence custodian position to a police detective. Committee action, HR approved 5-0, Finance approved 3-1. Fiscal impact, the 2020 impact of approximately $35,000. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Neal, second by Mrs. Rasmussen.
Begin voting. Excuse me. Mr. Peckham?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, your vote didn't go through.
Oh.
You must have hit request to speak?
Yeah, I
We
had
were
request to
voting.
speak.
We didn't see it.
Okay, I can close it out.
Okay. If I could ask a question, It seemed to me in some of the material, there was a case being made for how busy the evidence custodian has been processing 571 cases in 2004, 886, and now we're at 1,147. And so I thought there was an effort to beef up that position, but it sounds like that position would actually have additional responsibilities as a detective, so I don't get it.
And Chief Bliven from the Wausau Police Department can come forward and explain.
Unless you got a guy who's just a real whiz and can handle all that.
Well, I guess that's yet to be determined. Could be a person that is a whiz and can handle all those things. I think, what we hope to find in this position is somebody who has the background knowledge and understanding of law enforcement, having time spent in a law enforcement career. So somebody who's a detective, has tenure on the police department, has special training in handling of evidence. So I expect to find efficiencies within their ability to do that work. You think about a civilian that does that work, and we have to train them from the ground up on chain of custody of evidence, on processing evidence, on what evidence can be disposed of, how to determine when evidence can be disposed of, how to dispose of evidence, what evidence needs to be sent to the crime lab for analysis. All of those things we're teaching from the ground up. And what we found in the civilian positions is that our supervisors spend a lot of time with that evidence custodian trying to figure out the answer to all of those questions. A detective, because of the experience and training that they have, will already have that knowledge and the ability to make those decisions. They'll still need a supervisor for some things, but they will have a lot of ability to answer those questions for themselves and be able to create efficiency in that position. We separated employment on October 3rd at about 8:20 in the morning with our civilian evidence custodian, and about 10 minutes later, we had the incident over at Pine Grove Cemetery. And, I think the ability in that scenario, in that case, to be able to have a seventh detective, to be able to pull that detective out of the evidence room to come to that scene where we have 3 different areas that need to be processed in the collection of all of those items of evidence is going to create efficiency for us, to be able to have that detective that can analyze the scene, help guide our police officers and our detective bureau in how to collect the evidence. It's going to create efficiency. Is it going to make it so that it's a perfect system? I don't think so. You look at like the Marathon County Sheriff's Department, they have 1.5 FTEs involved in their evidence custodian position, one of which is a full-time detective, and they handle less cases than we do. So we do supplement that position with individuals, police officers who are on light duty because of FMLA reasons. They're injured or pregnant, and they're not on full-time patrol. So we supplement on a regular basis our evidence custodian position with those officers. That's what we foresee in that position.
Good to go? Okay. All right, so now, this time we can, begin voting. Here we go. Motion passed unanimously.
And file number 12-1012, a resolution of the Human Resources and Finance Committee, joint, authorizing health, dental, and supplemental insurance plan design for 2020. Committee action, HR approved 5-0, Finance approved 4-0, fiscal impact to be determined in the 2020 budget process. Had been originally prepared at 8%, now it will be at 3.2%. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Nutting. Do I have a second? By Mr. Gisselman.
Begin voting. Motion has passed unanimously.
And now at this time is your chance to come forward if you'd like to speak about a matter tonight, public comment about this or anything else going on in the city of Wausau. Now's your chance. I'll open it up. Would anybody like to come forward, speak about a matter? Would anybody like to come forward and speak? And one more time, would anybody like to come forward and speak? Public comment will be closed. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Nutting, second by Ms. Herbst.
That was the fastest I ever saw your arm go up. Begin voting. There we go. Motion passed unanimously.
And thank you, everybody, for coming. Have a great evening.